the one, a masterpiece.
Well, welcome everybody. Once again, you're at More Growth with Fewer Resources. This is a B2B Rocks webinar. This is our final webinar before 2023 comes around. So we're excited to get this done. Once again, this webinar is going to be recorded. We'll be sending this out. If you have any questions, given the amount of people who are here today, feel free to introduce your questions into the chat room. We'll try and address them as we go along. I'm working on my pronunciation. Our guest today, who's going to be talking with us about this, is Kay Pengelly. Kay, can you take a few moments and introduce yourself and also Upflowy?
I would love to. So, hi everyone. First of all, I'm Kay. You might have been wondering, who's this person who's been popping up on the B2B Rocks social media recently? And I'd love to tell you a bit more about myself. So I think I've had a lifelong, love for marketing. It started off in O Media, which is one of the largest advertising businesses in Australia, where I am today. And those roles range from customer success, which I find myself in today, but product and strategy as well. So I got to get a real good understanding of what pressures, different departments go through in that business. But I took that when I became the senior product manager of Upflowy, which I am now. Upflowy is effectively a conversion rate optimization tool, or it is a flow or experience builder. So a no-code tool where you can build and analyze things as they come through, and then use those analytics to improve that experience. We were lucky enough to win Product Hunt we won Product of the Day and also Product of the Week when we launched in September last year. And after that, I'm currently now the head of customer success at Upflowy, and I lead a team of those CRO experts. So it's been a fun journey for sure. And I hope you understand why I'm here and what I'm going to talk about, which is really, why are we here? Why are we here for the last webinar of 2022? What note are we ending it up on? I think it's not a far stretch to say that there's a lot of instability in the market right now, but I'm a firm believer in thinking that with instability comes certain challenges. And challenges are the things that help companies and the people that work in them evolve for the better. So I want to see this as the opportunity that it very much is. But I understand also in this kind of market that companies do tend to ramp up their efforts to increase output on that minimal spend. And actually, before I go on to what else I'll be talking about, you'll see that I've put a link down there in my notes, which I'm happy to send on at the end of this as well. There's actually research that points significantly to conclude that companies who market through these kind of tough times end up faring much better than their counterparts who don't as well. And this has actually been reflected in quite a few industries, so it doesn't seem like it's a one-off. So knowing that, but being faced with some pressure that companies are facing to innovate a bit better during this tough weather, I wanted to talk through how now is a really good way to evolve your day-to-day processes and thinking so you can emerge out of this as potentially a marketing superstar.
Yeah, hold on. I just want to touch on that. I think that's a great point you brought up. And I've seen several reports like that companies that are still pursuing their marketing plans are faring very well across different industries. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no problem. It was a fascinating stat because I think that original instinct for a lot of marketers is to go, pull it, save it away for a different day. But that brand salience, it turns really shows through if you keep the lights on during those times. And I think the biggest indication we had of that is certain brands during COVID as well.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So what I want to do today is I want to share some low-cost, no-code ideas that have worked for myself previously. And honestly, I just love talking about marketing. So it's always great to catch up with people like Steve, who's got that same passion as I do. And hopefully I can share that enthusiasm with you today. So without further ado, I present Kay's 3 key marketing tips. The first one is all about taking up back your time. So free up your time to focus on the things that matter. The next one is get curious, and the power of curiosity. It's about data, it's about testing, it's about analytics. It's those 3 commandments of continuous growth. And then the last one is how are you actually going to get into warp speed? So stop relying on engineers. How are the ways that you can empower yourself and your team to work autonomously? All right, so I might just jump into chapter 1 right now, which is Chapter 1, time is your most important resource. So while technology has certainly made our lives easier in a lot of different ways, I am a very strong believer in thinking about that the things that actually move the needle from a marketing perspective are all very human endeavors. However, not all time is created equal. And that might be a bit of a mysterious phrase to throw up, but I promise I'll explain myself in just a second. So what I want you to do before I start talking about this is just maybe start thinking about what takes up all of the time in your day. Because there's a great book that I read recently, and it's called Deep Work by Cal Newport. You can see it, what the book looks like on the left there. If you've got some time and you want some holiday reading, I'd very much recommend it. In Deep Work, we're introduced to two types of work that you might encounter in a workday. The first one being shallow work that you can see on the left there. The description there is non-cognitively demanding, logistically style tasks that can be performed while distracted. The counterpart to that, and the thing that I want to start focusing on as of today, is deep work. So those are categorized as professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that push your cognitive capabilities to their limit. Quite a weighty phrase, but those are the things that make you think, but they've got a lot of return on investment for those. In terms of the efforts, you can see shallow work that doesn't tend to create too much value in the new world. It's quite easy to replicate those tasks without thinking too much of them. But when you go to deep work, it's about creating new value. It's about improving your skill set, and it's quite hard to replicate because it is more cognitively demanding. A way you can summarize that, as I put in the bottom there, is working in the business versus working on the business. And it's working on the business that's probably going to yield those really strong results for you. But I'm also going to give you some examples of both so you can start to visualize it a bit better. So shallow work, some things that I do, which are important in a day-to-day, but they're not necessarily the things that really move the needle. I answer customer questions through our chatbot. I send them the right article that they're asking about. I reformat not the greatest data in Excel to make sure it's valid and it makes sense and I can pass it on to people. It's, copy, pasting information from here to there. I compare that to the kinds of deep work activities I can do, which is audit and restructure in our activation process. It's building out processes and strategies and playbooks for your team, creating a presentation for a webinar. That is an example of deep work because it's all about sharing that knowledge. And so what a lot of people encounter in their day-to-day is that a significant amount of their time is taken up by those shallow tasks. And they might still be important. They might help you hit your KPIs. I still answer all those customer questions because I want to make sure all of our customers are satisfied and happy. But shallow tasks won't necessarily push your business ahead in the same way that deep work will. So, there's business as usual tasks that you'll always need to tend to, but the more of them in your day that there are, the less capacity you'll have to focus on those big initiatives that matter. So, to allocate more time to deep work, what we need to do is reduce the amount of shallow work we do. So how are we going to do that? It's a great question. This is actually something that's been backed up by lean methodology for those fans in the crowd there as well. A big principle of that is finding ways to eliminate waste in your workday. Depending on the kind of organization you work for and depending on industry, this could look different. But I do think that I've got a few things I can recommend for you that will help regardless of what industry you're in. So hopefully I've sold you on the idea. It sounds great. How are we going to get more deep work into the day? And the most obvious answer for me is automation. So, I got so excited about it that I put a cute little animation in there.
You got an animation for your automation? Very nice.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a use case on why automation is, really booming in popularity right now, because I think you might be shocked to find out how much wasted time and resource there is in every company. So here's a real life example, actually. I have a customer who I call Roger because that's his name. This is not his picture though, so I've given some level of privacy there. Roger's the founder and director of operations for his small business. And the most valuable thing he can do on a day-to-day basis is acquire more customers by talking to them. But when we started working together, there was so much that he had to do on behalf of his customers that was taking up his time. He had to get significant amounts of data from customers and then pass it on to multiple different vendors. And all of those vendors had their own forms that he needed to fill out in different formats. So it was the right information in different ways. So he would spend, a significant amount of time per customer copy pasting the right information into multiple different formats. So that's, in this graph here, you can see that's hours spent on this kind of process that he could have invested into speaking into more customers that would have built up that customer base. So how did automation actually help this? Within a few days of working together, we were actually able to identify all of those formats that he needed. And so using Upflowy, we were able to generate, say, for example, a form stack link with all the responses pre-filled. So all he needed to do was click on them, review them, and then submit them rather than fill it out all again. We were able to send that to a Google Sheets and send that to all the right vendors. We were able to plug it into Monday.com as well. So internally, he could track it, the way that he needed his customers to go through that process as well. So by doing this, by automating just a small thing that was a frustration for him, we could save potentially hours of time per customer only by focusing on it for, say, 1 or 2 hours to get it up and running and then not thinking about it again. And I think that might not seem like much, but it sure adds up over time. So, it's a lovely feel-good use case, but let's just break it down into tangible figures to see just how powerful it is. And this is the way that it could affect you as well. Because say a process takes you 5 minutes every time you have to do it, much like filling out those forms might have, you might have to do that, say, 3 times a day, 3 customers a day, so 15 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Weekly, 15 minutes a day. So daily, that's 15 minutes.
Right.
Weekly, 75 minutes. Monthly, 300 minutes. Per year, 3,750 minutes, or 62 and a half hours. So you can see it's those little things that scale. And to put into perspective, 60 hours, that's what could you do with 62 extra hours in a year? And this was really interesting to me. You will see I've thrown another book recommendation up there because I love me some books. The thinking of needing 10,000 hours to master a skill is valid, but what that thinking was is becoming the master or the best in the world at something. In our day-to-day lives, we don't need to necessarily be the best in the world at something, but it's great to be good enough to get what you need to done. And this kind of research by Josh Kaufman here shows that you actually only need about 20 hours to get really competent at those key skills and understand the basics. So with just automating this 1 5-minute process that you do every day, that is potentially 3 whole new skills you could learn each year just by getting rid of that 1 5-minute process. And when I think about automation in that way, that's where it gets unbearably exciting for me.
Yeah, this is super good, and I completely agree. This is just one anecdotal side on this, which is I read a blog by a CEO of a project management company this week, and his project management company, he has 80 employees, and his competitors, most of his competitors average on average 1,500 employees, and he said we are successfully competing with them. And our revenue, we're actually the smallest of them. We're doing a third of their revenue with 80 employees compared to 1,500 revenues. So I think that's kind of one of the magic of our industry is we all have access to a lot of the same tools, but who can organize their people and their processes the best? That's a huge strategic advantage. So it's really interesting take. Sorry.
I love that anecdote actually, because I think it shows that the most important resource a company could have is the time of their brilliant workers.
Yeah.
And using that time in the right way is going to be the way you set your company up for success.
Yeah.
So you do have things, you do have roles as well, which require sitting in a seat and kind of doing the same thing day in, day out. But I think it's about maximizing what you can give back, which is where it gets interesting. And I really love that as an example. Like you see it working in the real life, and what better way to show that that's how you can really, hit the limit of like what we can do on a weekly basis. I really love that.
Yeah. It's not managing it, it's unlocking potential. That's right. It's a great part about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if hopefully you're all as excited as Steve and I are about this concept of automation, here's kind of my tips on how you can roll it out and how you can start thinking about it. So one, as I asked you a few minutes ago, take a look at your day-to-day and what's taking up the most of your time. And then ask yourself the second question: how many of those processes really need a human touch? And this actually can come down to the business. And I'll give you an example that we've got at Upflowy, where we've got a chatbot right now on our site where all customers can answer, ask questions and we answer them. A lot of that actually could be automated. Based on the keywords that we have, we could set up a chatbot that searches for approximately the best messages and sends it forward. But for us, at the point we are at right now, we established that we really want that human touch. We want them to think that they are speaking to a human on the other end of the line. We want them to feel like they have been helped by somebody who's invested in making sure it's working for them. So that was actually an example of something that we didn't automate that we could, because we wanted that human touch point at them. We especially in marketing, you're always marketing at the end of the day is speaking to other humans. And so it's not necessarily a one size fits all of just make everything easier as possible. You've got to think of those caveats as well. Third point there is where does any kind of information or data come from and where does it need to go? And that's for a lot of the at times soul crushing fixing of data in Excel and so on. What would make that process easier? What's the end result? What's the beginning result? How can you combine the two? 4, once you find those things, automate it. And I'll show you a few examples on the next slide of what tools you can do to start doing that. And then after that, once you've got your time back, use that time to focus on those things that matter. Recommendations for helpful apps. I think especially for people who are kind of starting to dip their toes into the automation sphere, I would highly recommend taking a look at Make and Zapier. Reason for that is they've both got freemium accounts as well. So you can actually pop in today, sign up and try out these kinds of things and see just how much it's going to move the needle on automation. And I think it's always helpful to have a working prototype to kind of pass it on to management and show them the value of it as well. So Make, formerly known as Integramat, you can see on the right here, I've taken a bit of a screenshot to show you how it works, where you connect certain apps. You send them on to do functions or processes, and then you can even send responses back to certain apps as well. You can just connect a lot of things together. And you can see Zapier does the same thing here. So the example they've got is, if there's a specific kind of email that you can search in Gmail, they can create by an automatic row in a Google Sheets based on that data as well. So again, just bringing together all the things you already use in a way that you don't have to do it. For the more advanced of you as well, or pending what apps are in your tech stack, it's also worth looking at Segment. I am cognizant that this is supposed to be, talking about how we can do it on a lower budget, and Segment can get a bit more pricey, but having something like a CDP in place is going to be worth its weight in gold in terms of connecting all of your apps in those right spots as well. So yeah.
Hold on, just because everyone may not be familiar with that acronym, I know I wasn't. What is a CDP?
It is a customer data platform.
Okay, thank you.
Effectively, it's a way that it's kind of a data pool, say, that holds every bit of customer data that might come through your app. So, name, email, maybe what kind of persona they belong to. It stores it in the right spot so it can send out to all these different points that might need it. So, for example, our CDP is Segment. We've got that connected into Intercom, which means as soon as somebody starts a conversation, we know their first name, last name. We know those information about them. But that can also be sent to our HubSpot accounts as well to create a new lead. It's effectively a way of doing that automation for specifically customer data. Whereas I think automation can be a bit wider than that in terms of just minimizing processes. Customer data platforms are a really strong and recommended way to get your data in the right spot without needing to fiddle with it.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. Great explanation. And now we all know what CDPs are.
Yeah, I'm glad I could do something new today, if only that. So anytime. Feel free to questions at any point as well. So that's kind of the end of chapter 1. That's the end of the automation thing. In chapter 2, which will come up in a second, it's going to be, okay, we've got our time back. What do you recommend we do with that time? What kind of deep work can we do? But Steve, is there anything you want me to clarify in that first part?
No, that's great. That's great. No, it's very clear. I know I told myself I would take a look at Twilio's segment, and I haven't had an opportunity yet, but I got to get to that.
It's all right. We're coming into silly season now, so hopefully in some downtime you can do some light reading on Twilio segment.
There you go.
Brilliant. Okay, chapter 2. Keep curious and carry on. So what's really interesting to me is humans are naturally curious creatures. I've got another book recommendation down here. I think if there's anything at the end of this presentation that you'll understand, it's that I'm a big books person, if that's not been clear already. But I really love this quote from Why, from Mario Livio. So other animals are curious, but only humans are worried and curious about reasons and causes for things. Only humans really ask the question, why? But on top of that, it turns out research-based as well, being curious is actually really good for you in the sense of, studies are showing that curious people are happier on average, and it actually boosts achievement, including performance at work as well. So there's something about curiosity and wanting to find things out, which is very inherently and beautifully human. So let's tap into that and let's use something that we've all naturally got and make it work for us. So I really love this quote here as well. Research has formalized curiosity. It's poking and prying with a purpose. Because when people say research, that's like, it can sometimes sound like an overwhelming thing. Some people might think like, I'm not a data science. I'm not like trained in research, but you are a human. And that means you do have some curiosity in you. So let's use that as well. But why am I talking about research? Why am I talking about curiosity? It all leads up to something that's going to be invaluable to your business to keep on growing year on year. And that thing is A/B testing. Again, another book here and another quote that I love. A/B testing is the most powerful way to turn clicks into customers. The people who wrote this book are so on board with A/B testing that is a big statement to make. And it's something I agree with as well. And the reason for it, the reason A/B testing and these kinds of things are so important is it's kind of a cycle of continuous improvement here. So you can see you test something and then you measure the results of that test. And based on what you've learned, you can upgrade something and then test again. And getting into that habit of testing, measuring, learning, that's going to keep on improving your metrics just like bit by bit every year until they get better. And I'll give you an example of something we've done as well. At Upflowy, we track our activation rates, how many customers go through our app and end up getting that first strike or, like that aha moment in our app. And the way we got that up through, the course of a year, we got it up by over about 10 percentage points, was we kept on running tests. We kept on measuring them week on week. Based on what we learned, we would make more assumptions and keep on testing. And the things that worked well for us, we decided to keep. The things that didn't, we decided to move on and do another test. So take it from me. I've seen this work and I wholeheartedly believe in the power of it. So I'd love nothing more if I can show other people today how much it can help you out if you commit the time to it.
This need to understand why something works and using A/B testing, this comes to Kay honestly. I also saw on her bio, her LinkedIn bio, that she's a fan of Simon Sinek, and he's famous for his discourse Why, and his book Why. And so when you understand this, you can communicate more effectively. And so this is not in any way dissimulation. She really is about this A/B testing and why. This is who Kate you are, Kay. That's great.
That's right. This is me being my true authentic self, living my truth.
Yeah.
But if you want another example, just think of any kids that you might know and how often they just ask why when they're learning so much.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that and let's kind of bring that same kind of glee into what we do day to day as well. You'll also actually you'll notice in this graph here it says test, measure, learn. Very similar to build, measure, learn, which is one of those key tenets in the lean startup as well. because it's based on those same principles. The lean startup was so wildly popular because it was build quickly, learn from it, measure it, learn from it, and keep going. And it's kind of using that kind of agile mentality to be like, all right, we've learned that. Now let's learn another thing. Let's learn another thing. And it's the practice of getting into that habit and realizing that, you're on a marathon here. It's not just doing one test successfully and being like, I've done one successful test, I'm a research genius. It's about the habit and the dedication you have to keep on pushing that needle forward.
Yep.
All right. So run an A/B test. I'd recommend running A/B tests all over the shop. And in the next few slides, I'll show you how to do that well. That being said, I talked about how important data is when making these kinds of decisions as well. So we can, leverage that natural habit of curiosity by A/B testing. However, I would make sure you don't just try any test that comes to mind. Very much examine any data points that you already have. And you might not think you'd have that many, but trust me, you do. And see where your business could actually benefit from testing the most. So think about your pain points, whether it be drop-off rate, disengagement, churn, for example. And then focus on those things, because your pain points and seeing progress in those are long-term going to yield the best results. So you just got your time back by automating, spend it wisely, make sure your decisions are still driven by that data. So I present to you the commandments of A/B testing, a way to run an A/B test well.
Let's hear it.
Sorry, what was that?
I said, let's hear it.
Let's do it. All right. First one, pick one variable to test. So in testing, you want to make sure that the changes that you're testing are things that are actually the things influencing those metric shifts. If you don't pick one variable to test, you run into the possibility of drawing a false conclusion, which means you potentially rolling out a test that doesn't actually lead to better results long term. So we really want to avoid that. You'll see in this example, one variable to test would be the color of the button at the bottom. Very basic A/B test, but let's start from the basics and work our way up. Would changing the color of that make people want to click on it more? So that's the one variable we want to test, button, and the way it looks. Identify your assumptions and a goal. Assumptions are a really powerful thing because I think they challenge the biases that you would fall into. So my assumption here was if we change the color of the button to green, more customers will submit this information through to us. And the goal there is getting a result where in this A/B test, I see one button drives more clicks than the other. Again, I'm starting out with a very basic A/B test, but if you can start visualizing the things that you can do in your business, this is the way I would want you to start thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. Once you've done those two, create a control and a challenger. So in this example, this is actually straight out of the Upflowy interface where I've created an A/B test for this exact reason. The control is what we originally had. So, this red button here.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenger is the green button that you see on the right. And you can see up here right now, I've got the metrics as 50% split this way, 50% split that way. That's a whole thing in itself. I could go into the nitty gritty of those A/B tests if I would, but I want you to get the bigger picture first.
Okay.
But what this effectively means is 50% of my audience will see this red button, 50% of my audience will see this green button.
Okay.
And over time, we've got the analytics to track which of these experiences works better. And then once they work better, obviously you can choose the winning, test, and you can continue just working alone with that. Yeah, and actually, I mentioned the 50-50 split there. Split your sample groups at random. This is really important, actually, more important than people might think.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to have them at random because, again, much like picking that one variable at the beginning, you don't want any bias sneaking in there. So you want to attribute as much as possible to the change that you've made. And the best way to do that is by having an entirely random group of people that go through it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I get you.
Cool. All right. This has got a complex looking graph in it, but I'll promise I'll talk you through it. It's important to understand when a result becomes statistically valid. So what I mean by that, and actually what this graph means, if I can talk through it a bit, is there's a bell curve in all kind of responses. And what's likely to happen is the more people that you've got going through a test, the more that they are likely to get in that kind of top of the bell curve there. But with fewer people who go through that test, there is a very real chance that you'll have an anomaly where someone goes outside of the bell curve or on the other edges. And without enough people to kind of validate that, what you run the risk of is, again, coming to a conclusion that's a bit overblown or a bit underblown. And that means you lose an opportunity to understand your data best and then make the best decisions based on that. So basically,
no. So, I mean, I get the concept where if you flip a coin, 10 times, you might get 70% for heads and 30% for tails. But if you flip a coin 1,000 times, it'll probably work out closer to 50-50. Is it ever a problem, or are there any, what happens if you have a small sample pool? Or, I mean, I don't want to take you off subject, but do you have any tips for dealing when you have a small sample pool? If you're a startup and you don't have a lot of customers yet, or a lot of people visiting your pages yet, how do you work around that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, something we ran into as well, because when we launched, we were already A/B testing, but we didn't necessarily have as much traffic to make decisions on the spot, so we had to wait. Right. So this is when I would recommend running a test for over a week or two.
Okay.
Make sure more people go through that, but also, filter out any people who might come through. For example, we did a lot of testing on our own website, and we had to make sure that we took away any of the data coming through from them, because we knew that we weren't necessarily going through that experience in the same way that customers would be. Sure. So making sure we took out that noise as well. But effectively, it's not a bad thing if you keep a test running for long enough for you to get those results. That's still a test. You may not be able to test as fast as people who've got a lot of traffic, but, that's what we're working you up to, getting more traffic as well. So, it can still start while you're small, and then you can really ramp up the speed of those tests and the complexity of them as you get more people coming through.
Gosh. Okay, good.
And then I believe finally, decide when to stop. So, speaking of sample size, recommended it's at least 1,000, users or sessions or whatever it may be, in the sense that what your metric is. I would also say don't stop the test too soon. It's always good to wait a bit and make the best logical conclusion, rather than running a very quick test, making a snap judgment prematurely, and then moving on to the next thing. Be thorough, give it its due diligence.
Okay. Are you guys often running several tests at one time concurrently?
It depends. So I did mention in the first step, choose one variable and choose to test that.
Right.
It's worth mentioning, what I mean by that is one variable within a certain part of our app or our experience.
But you could be elsewhere running testing another variable and another something else. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, we try and have those things very separate from each other, because, again, we don't want to influence any of the other ones. But, we've got a website, we've got an app, we've got multiple parts of the app. They are all things that we can A/B test within. So as long as you isolate them in one specific part of your experience, and then you run the one test, you can absolutely run a whole bunch of different tests at once.
Okay.
Cool. I realize that's kind of a lot. That's a lot of instructions. And unless you're all there with some handy pen and paper, it might be a bit difficult. But the good news is you can get a lot of these templates just online. This was just, done by a quick Google search, which gives you the architecture and the structure to run your own A/B tests in a way that's logical and, healthy. So this is just one I found. What's the purpose of your test and why is it important? That might seem like a silly question, but sometimes it's a really good idea to emphasize why you're running this test and why it's going to move the needle. That's going to stop you running tests which aren't necessarily the most important tests.
That was kind of my question, is similarly, like sometimes you have a project manager and the product manager is looking at things to incorporate in the product, but given the time and the resources he's going to have and customer needs, do you do the same thing with testing? Do you make up a list of tests you would like to run and then prioritize them, and maybe those priorities shift? I don't know if you have like a master list of all the testing you want to do. But
Absolutely. Yeah, we started off basic as well. We had an Excel sheet originally. Obviously, there's many other apps that you can use, but just at the time, Excel seemed the easiest one to use.
right.
Where all of us got into a group session, we took an hour, we wrote down every single assumption we had about the app. And then we actually ranked them based on how much reach they would have within the app, how many of our customers might be affected by this, but also how important it was for us to learn from that. A big one for us is we originally noticed a big drop-off rate in an early part of our sign-up. And so any test that we could run there was categorized as highly important because it was such a large pain point to us. And, you know, much like project management, much like product management, priorities change on such a quick basis. So it's always great to have an insights bank of every assumption that you've ever made and then reshuffle them based on what's coming at you in those, you know, most recent weeks.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Okay.
Glad to hear it. All right. Now this is chapter 3, which is let's go no code. So let's go through what we've already learned so far. We've talked about the power of automation and how that gives you your time back to work on the things that matter. We've talked about the power of A/B testing and how that is routinely going to help you improve a lot of metrics across the board. And now chapter 3 is we are marketers, and a big pain that I've felt in a past life is needing to wait for an engineering team who are, you know, so high in demand. There's always things that they could be working on within the app and so on. So often our marketing requests fall to the side. So let's go no code. Let's harness the power of this that we're seeing. So no code to me is how you start to work on your terms. A/B testing, automation, they're usually actually factors that previously relied heavily on tech teams, but not anymore. They're things that we can start doing now. And you might see again, I'm a big fan of that lean methodology. You can now build, measure, and learn quickly by yourself. Something that may have taken months to roll out, depending on your tech team's backlog, can now be done by you and your team in a few hours. And that is very exciting to me. And then, yeah, make things, learn fast, iterate, keep up that progress to get those results.
Yeah, I mean, you could be shedding customers while you're waiting for your tech team to do an A/B test.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
In that time, you're also going to be at the receiving end of like, why aren't these metrics getting better? And I think, you know, everyone will agree that it's a very frustrating conversation to be like, they're not getting better because I'm not getting the help I need. And they're like, well, why aren't they? You know, let's stop those conversations overall.
They're not getting better, and I can't tell you why because we're unable to do a test. But it's really interesting. One of the reoccurring conversations I have with a lot of startups is customer acquisition cost. So, and then you have this golden day where you sign up to get access to something, and you know, what are they doing that first time they sign up? And if you're not getting them using it that first time signed up, that golden day, that golden hour, that's a huge loss for the company. So you really need to understand the mechanics of what are going on there and what you're doing right and wrong. I mean, I think it's especially important to understand what you're wrong, but it's equally important to understand what you're doing right too. And
yeah,
it's really interesting.
Yeah, I don't have a screenshot of this one, but it is a book, I think one of my favorite books I've read in the last 2 years, which is Product-Led Onboarding by Ramlee John. Talks all about that kind of like what they call the first strike. Because we know as soon as a customer gets into your app, if they start using it on the day, it is much more likely that you won't churn that customer. So how do you get as many as people doing that at scale? He talks about A/B testing and that, but it's just such a great blueprint for understanding how you should think about onboarding that I would recommend it to all marketers to have a listen to.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is what you're talking about, these things and processes and being able to do no code. What we see is that the technology aspects of what we do are getting easier. Like you can do like this incredible what we're able to do now, what a small team is able to do to even do A/B testing like this thing. But at the same time, expectations on the customer side keep growing. And I think that's one of the challenges of me working in technology is like whenever I go to my bank, I just go like, my bank really doesn't get me. And every other sector or industry that I work in or visit just tangentially, I'm like, they are not doing it like we do it in tech or in SaaS where we really, and so credit, but keep going. I'm sorry to have disruptive.
No, I completely agree. Like I've definitely worked with businesses where I'm like, this is how you do things.
Yeah.
And I think we're so lucky to be in tech now where we really are pushing the, like, you know, pushing the limits of what we can do and how well it can be.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you sometimes get stuck in tech world where I'm like, this is the baseline now, right? Like this is how everyone's got to do it. And it's crazy to understand that how many businesses don't do that. But it's also, I think when I look at that in the room for opportunity, that's where it gets really exciting.
And I don't know, you must have the experience sometimes where you're walking around like what's his name in the Matrix, and you're looking at stuff and you're seeing like coded numbers and you're like, why aren't they doing this better? Yeah, why can't they figure this out? It's one more anecdote, but I went to my bank and I signed up for an appointment and they're like, well, put in your agent's name or the representative's name. And I'm like, well, I don't know who his name is. You guys are always changing the representatives. And I said, but I know what my name is. Do you have that there? And they're like, yeah, but you have to put in the representative's name to have your appointment. And
Crazy.
so they had spent like all this money on building a system, and it was built off an assumption, which is that I would know my representative's name, and their assumption was just false. And so the whole thing just flawed. Hopefully they didn't rip it all out and throw it out. All they need is change it and let me put in, or let the patient, or let the customer put in his name. But
Great. Yeah. I think
so it's really funny.
Just to add on to that, actually, I think since I've been a product manager in a past life, I think now just constantly in my brain, I'm looking for those experiences being like, that's so interesting. I wonder what decisions and research went into that, whether it be a good experience or a bad experience. I'm always like, how did they come to this conclusion? It's always a fun game, I guess, for nerdy product managers to play.
Well, I think it's just good that we are putting more data and more analysis into the marketing side, because I think I think it one of the things I think that's like people who don't understand marketing, I think understand it's like, I always tell the French, like I like, you know, I live in France and I'm like, no one has better hamburgers than the French do, like the quality of meat. And I said, but Americans, we have McDonald's. And so people line up to eat bad food. So that should tell you something about marketing. So, but marketing, again, for that organization is a real science. And clearly we're taking it up for SaaS up to be more of a science too, as opposed to something that's feel good and making ourselves.
It's based on gut feel, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so true. Great point. All right, so where to find the right tools for you? Like right now, we're in luck because the no-code industry, including where I work for as well, Upflowy, is booming right now. And the great thing is, it might sound overwhelming because there's so many things that you could use to upgrade, you know, and automate. The great news is there are so many no-code directories out there already that will point you in the right direction to the right app. So this is an example of nocode.tech. They've actually got this brilliant tool matching quiz for you where they ask you a few questions of, you know, what experience do you want to build? And through that, they actually email you the results and what you can actually start using as of today. So they're out there and they're quite easy to find as well. There's a ton of directories. So I would, if you've got a few minutes today, just put aside some time and take a look at these and see what could work best for you as well. Because I assure you that once you start focusing on that deep work and, you know, pushing the business forward, that is directly linked to the amount of satisfaction that you feel with your role as well. So not only are you doing, you know, value for your business, you're going to be in a situation where you feel like you are committing more valuable work day to day than you were previously. And that's always going to make you a happier worker. So I would just very much try it. Give it a go. Let me know how it goes.
I haven't done that yet, so I'm going to have to take you up on that and give that a shot.
Please do. Well, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn as well and have a chat about it if need be. So I'm always happy to help you out there.
Okay.
But just to summarize everything before we go into kind of like a Q&A or, you know, anything else is automate, make the most of your time and focus on the things that matter. Test, use the data, use the testing, use the analytics. Keep on doing that and leverage your curiosity to keep on moving the business forward. And then no code, work autonomously without needing that sign off from the engineers. And they are the 3 key marketing tips. I hope they were helpful to you. They've absolutely helped me in my career. So the best I can do right now is pass it on to others and hope for the best there as well.
Yeah, I think the automating and testing, I definitely need to do that. I'm not sure the no coding. I have to experiment more with that. I just want to clear up something. I wrote in the chat thing that Excel is still being used to keep the USA nuclear codes. That is actually not technically correct. I made that up.
Yeah.
But it's true that it's amazing how many companies are still using Excel as their customer data platform,
Yeah.
and really keeping everything together with glue and a bunch of other things. Well, this is really very interesting. Where do you go? Where I saw you had several LinkedIn. You've done several certificates on LinkedIn. Where do you go for ideas? Where are you going? What are some of your favorite blogs where you go to read and learn and get new ideas and to acquire new skills? Just
Yeah,
since we
it's
have
a
a
good
few minutes
question.
and no one else is asking questions, I'll put that to you.
No worries. I might just throw this up there while we're in
Oh,
there.
oh yeah.
So that's for anyone still listening here. Thank you for coming. You're more than welcome to use this code B2B Rocks 20 off to sign up today and get 20% off. But I will answer your question now, Steve. So
Okay.
I am someone who I like to think. I think other people might confirm this for me. I do genuinely live by what I talk about when I say being naturally curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always looking for ways to learn on top of my day to day. So all of the books that you saw thrown up there, I've read those.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to find things that are relevant to my day because it's not necessarily about following what they say word for word, but
Mm-hmm.
it's picking the brain out of people who are the best in our industry and seeing what they think about it and trying out things that have worked for them.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and this is maybe like this is kind of like a gaming kind of thing where I feel like I want to rapidly acquire skill points and then kind of use that to progress to the next level. And I think it's that excitement of kind of being a bit better than I was the day before that really drives me. And I think, going to webinars such as this, where you get those book recommendations, speaking to people in your business that you've got a lot of time for in terms of the way they think. For example, Ben, the head of data science in my company, is a wildly brilliant person. And he recommended me a book on A/B testing. And I read it because, I've got a lot of respect for what he does. I don't necessarily comb blogs. I know a lot of people do. It's just not necessarily the style I go towards. It's more finding what your passion is. When I started in customer success, it was reading every customer success book to see how people did it well. In product management, it was doing the same. It's what do you wish you knew more about? And then, you can find, for example, if I Google top 10 product management books, people have done that work for me and they'll give you recommendations and a quick overview of what they do. So that's how I always find these things. And I keep on pushing that forward for myself and my kind of own personal development journey.
And what about and I used to read a lot more professionally for work, but I've sort of let it go as I had kids and got a dog and probably don't read as much as I should anymore. What about just eclectic reading? Do you read anything stuff that's really outside your field of interest or anything like that, just to free up disk space on your brain and let your brain wander a bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a difference between reading to really learn and then evolve versus reading just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do enough of that as well. Like, especially with kids, other responsibilities that adults have, there's so much that you've got to keep a track of. So
Mhm.
I'm actually a huge fan of podcasts that you can kind of listen to on the train, or things like Audible as well. Or actually, there's a brilliant app whose name evades me right now, but they've actually taken on the bestsellers and they've condensed them into the main points in about 15 minutes. So if you
Blinkist,
wanted to, there we go,
Blinkist,
Blinkist, yes.
Blinkist. That's my new thing, and I think Kay, I'm gonna contact you on LinkedIn so we can share a subscription and
Great.
get going on Blinkist. I think we're both Blinkist people.
Yeah, we can
Absolutely.
be accountability buddies because, I talk a big game, but some weeks it's really hard to do that. But if you're doing it with somebody else, it can be easier as well.
Well, maybe we just need to do a live stream where we take a SaaS business book a week and talk about that.
Oh, I would love that. I would love nothing more. If you want to do that, let me know
I
because
I
big
I
books guy.
I
Yeah.
would do it with you because you have the personality for it, and also you would hold me accountable. I have no doubt about that. Listen, thank you so much for our plans today. We're gonna have a stop here in a few minutes. we had quite a few people sign up for this. Not quite as many showed up, but that sometimes that happens, so that's okay.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out, keep an eye on Kay. I have a feeling that we're going to see her speaking publicly more and more often, and I wouldn't be surprised I don't know exactly how old she is, but in 5 to 10 years, if she's a CMO somewhere, I wouldn't be surprised at all. So that's great. And thank you very much for the B2B Rocks code, and we'll make sure that's distributed in a newsletter as well, with your permission, of course.
Amazing. Well, thank you for having me. As always, it's a pleasure talking to you, Steve.
Okay.
And it's nice to always find someone who gets excited about things as I do.
Yeah, even he got excited too back there. Well, listen, really. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
All right, you too.
All right, bye-bye.
Close to the eyes, she's a one, a masterpiece.